They say love is blind, but I think it's just stupid. Vanessa didn't see me as her husband for 10 years. She saw me as her pawn. And that's when I decided to change the game. When I first met Vanessa, she was everything I thought I wanted. She was beautiful, one of those people who could walk into a room and instantly turn heads. She was ambitious, driven, and had big plans for her future. That ambition was one of the things I admired most about her. At the time, I thought, this is the kind of woman who will push me to be better. But things change. Or maybe I just started seeing what was there all along. In the beginning, her comments about me felt playful, like teasing. She'd joke about how I wasn't as fashionable as her, or how I needed to upgrade my taste in cars. I laughed it off. I told myself, she's just joking. This is how she shows affection. But as time went on, those little jokes started to feel different, sharper, meaner. She'd make comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough, how my work wasn't as exciting or prestigious as hers. And it wasn't just in private. She'd say these things in front of her friends and family, and they'd laugh. And there I'd be sitting, forcing a smile, pretending like it didn't bother me. I didn't want to see it for what it was. At first, I ignored her words, believing her criticism came from playfulness. I thought love meant patience. But love isn't supposed to feel like humiliation. The truth is, Vanessa never saw me as her equal. I worked hard to build a stable career and provide a good life for us. I wasn't flashy or over the top, but I was consistent. I handled the bills, the mortgage, the investments, everything. But to her it was never enough. She earned a decent salary, sure, but she didn't want a decent life. She wanted luxury. And her idea of luxury was spending money as if it grew on trees. Designer bags, weekend getaways, fine dining. She always wanted more. And where did that more come from? Our joint account. The one I worked overtime to fill. Every time she spent money, she'd brush it off saying, it's an investment in our happiness. But it was never our happiness she cared about. It was hers. I let it slide because I wanted to keep the peace, but deep down I knew the balance in that account didn't just reflect our finances. It reflected our marriage. I was putting in everything and she was taking whatever she wanted. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier. But when you love someone, you make excuses. Respect is the foundation of love. Without it, everything else starts to crumble. I started noticing small, unusual withdrawals from our joint account. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe Vanessa was paying for work-related stuff, like she said, business essentials. That's what she always called them. But as time went on, the numbers started getting bigger, and the purchases didn't add up. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and those luxury spa bookings, things Vanessa had never needed or talked about before. I asked her about it, just casually at first. Hey, what's this charge? Did you buy something? And she'd just laugh it off like it was no big deal. You don't understand, she'd say, smiling. These are investments in my image. Investments in her image? I didn't even know what that meant. But instead of pushing, I told myself, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. She works hard. Maybe she deserves to treat herself. So, I let it slide. Then came the business trip. She announced it last minute, which was unusual for her. Vanessa was always someone who planned her work trips weeks in advance. This time, though, it was rushed. She didn't even give me the usual rundown. Just, I have an important trip tomorrow. It's for work. Don't wait up. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I asked where she was going, and her answer was vague. Oh, just a seminar at a resort in another state. It's no big deal. I nodded, but I wasn't buying it. No flight bookings. No work documents lying around. And then I checked her hotel reservation. It was far from the city where she said the meeting would be. That was the moment I knew I had to find out the truth. The next morning, I waited until she left and tracked her. I'd hidden an AirTag in her luggage the night before, just to see if my gut feeling was wrong. But when the tracker showed her taxi heading away from the airport, I knew I wasn't imagining things. I got in my car and followed her. Part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe there was some other explanation. But it didn't take long to catch up. Her taxi pulled into the driveway of a luxury hotel, one far away from where she'd said her business meeting was supposed to be. I parked nearby and waited, keeping my distance, trying not to be seen. And then I saw her. She stepped out of the car. She wasn't alone. She was with a young guy. She probably picked on her way before I tracked them down, a guy who couldn't have been more than his mid-20s. She was older than him. I didn't need to see anything else. The way they walked into that hotel together, laughing and leaning in close, told me everything I needed to know. I wanted to storm in there, to grab her by the arm and ask her if this was her business trip, but I didn't. I just sat in my car, staring at the hotel entrance, my mind racing. I sat there for what felt like hours, letting it sink in. She wasn't the person I thought she was. And maybe she never had been. The night Vanessa came back from her so-called business trip, I was waiting. She walked into the house with that same confidence she always carried. I didn't say anything at first, just watched as she dropped her bag by the door and asked casually, "How have you been?" I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk." She looked at me, raising an eyebrow, like I was interrupting her schedule. "What now?" she asked, clearly annoyed. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery, and handed it to her. "Explain this." She glanced at the screen, and I saw her hesitate for the first time in a long time. There it was, photos of her entering a hotel with another man, clear as day. For a split second, she looked panicked. But it didn't last long. Vanessa quickly shifted gears. "Are you seriously spying on me? What kind of husband does that?" "That's disgusting," she snapped, her tone sharp. "What, did you hire some creepy private investigator or something?" "Don't turn this on me, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. "You lied. You said it was a business trip, but this," I pointed to the photos, "this isn't business. Explain yourself." Her face froze for a moment. She knew there was no denying it now. The evidence was undeniable, and she had nowhere to run. But instead of apologizing or explaining, she did something I didn't expect. She smirked. "So what? What are you going to do about it? End the marriage? You think showing me some pictures is going to scare me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't even pretending to deny it anymore. "Is that it?" I asked. No apology, no explanation. Vanessa let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Apologize? To you? For what? For being with someone who actually excites me? For finding a man who doesn't bore me to death?" I stared at her, trying to stay calm, but her words kept cutting deeper. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice dripping with smugness. "You're too weak to leave. You'd lose everything if you tried. Your house, money, reputation. I'd make sure of it. You're nothing without me." And then I smiled. I said nothing. Not a single word. Vanessa took my silence as a victory. She grabbed her bag and stormed off upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. But at that moment I knew. She thought she had the upper hand, but the truth was, her arrogance had already sealed her fate. I wasn't going to yell or argue. That would have given her too much satisfaction. No, I had something better in mind. She had no idea what was coming next, and I wasn't about to let her ruin the surprise. Because the truth was, I wasn't nothing without her. In a few months, she'd see just how wrong she was. You know, looking back, there's something kind of poetic about arrogance. Vanessa's arrogance, to be precise. She always thought she was the smartest person in the room, the one pulling all the strings. But it was that same arrogance that would be her downfall. I remember the night before our wedding like it was yesterday. Vanessa had been so preoccupied with the venue, the guest list, and making sure everything was picture perfect that she barely gave the paperwork any attention. I'd asked her to sign the prenuptial agreement as a formality. Back then I wasn't trying to protect myself from her. I was just being cautious, thinking it was the responsible thing to do. She signed it without reading a single word. I didn't push her to read it either. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Whatever. Let's get it over with. It's not like we'll ever need it." That stuck with me. She was so confident in herself, so sure I'd never have a reason to invoke it. But that arrogance, that blind confidence, was about to cost her everything. The agreement was simple and crystal clear. If either of us cheated, the guilty party would forfeit half of their assets. No loopholes. No wiggle room. It was all there in black and white. I wonder now if she even realized she was signing a prenup that night, or if she just assumed it was another boring document for me to handle. Over the next few months, after I caught her cheating, I started planning my exit. Quietly, methodically. The first thing I did was move money out of our joint accounts. I didn't do it all at once. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I made small transfers over time into personal accounts she couldn't access. Then I contacted a lawyer. I explained everything: her infidelity, the prenup, and the evidence I'd collected. The lawyer assured me that the agreement was ironclad, especially with the proof I had. Photos, timestamps, bank records showing her hotel charges, it was all there. My lawyer and I went over every detail to make sure there were no surprises. She had no idea what was coming. Honestly, the more she talked down to me, the more determined I became. Every insult, every condescending behavior, it only fueled my resolve. She thought she had me under her thumb, that I'd just accept her infidelity and keep funding her lifestyle. But she was wrong. In a way, it felt like fate. Vanessa had spent years thinking she was untouchable, but she had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. Vanessa was still in bed when I placed the neatly prepared stack of divorce papers on the dining table. This was the day I'd take my life back. I went about my usual routine, brewing coffee, scrolling through emails, until she finally walked into the kitchen, dressed in her silk robe, hair still messy from sleep. She didn't even glance at me. That was Vanessa's way. She acted like I was invisible most mornings. But when her eyes landed on the papers, her head snapped up. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, holding up the stack like it was a joke. I leaned back in my chair, calm, composed, and sipping my coffee. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "This is long overdue, Vanessa." Her face twisted into a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You're joking," she scoffed. "You think you can just end this? You think you can walk away from me?" "I don't think," I replied, setting my cup down. "I know." Vanessa slammed the papers down on the table and launched into a tirade, her voice rising with every sentence. "You're overreacting. You always do this. You're acting like I'm the bad guy," she yelled, her tone dripping with mockery. "This is just another one of your pathetic attempts to get attention." I stayed quiet, letting her vent. I had nothing to say to her anymore. But then she switched gears, and her voice grew cold. "You think you can win against me? You'll regret this," she hissed, jabbing a finger in my direction. "I'll make sure you lose everything. Your money, your reputation, everything." That's when I stood up, calm but firm. "Vanessa, sit down," I said. My voice was steady, even as she glared at me like she wanted to tear me apart. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "I think you've forgotten something." I opened the folder and slid a single document across the table: the prenup. Her confident smirk faltered the moment she saw it. Her eyes scanned the page, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's the agreement you signed before we got married," I said, my tone matter-of-fact. "The one that says if either of us cheats, the other keeps half of what we have. You signed it, Vanessa. And I have the evidence to prove you didn't keep your end of the deal." Her confidence crumbled right in front of me. For once, she didn't have a witty comeback or a condescending remark. She was cornered, and we both knew it. Of course, Vanessa didn't go down without a fight. That wasn't her style. She dragged the divorce to court, claiming the prenup was fake and insisting she'd never seen it before. She tried everything. Tears, charm, even outright lies. But the judge wasn't buying it. I came prepared. My lawyer presented everything. The signed prenup, the bank records showing her reckless spending, and even the photographs I'd taken that night at the hotel. It was all laid bare in front of the court, and no amount of theatrics could save her. When the ruling finally came down, it was clear I'd won. The prenup held up, and I retained the majority of our shared assets, my savings, my investments, and the business holdings she once tried to take credit for. The judge awarded her the house, but it wasn't the victory she thought it would be. The house still had a mortgage, one I'd stopped paying the moment I filed for divorce. With her limited income and poor financial management, it didn't take long for reality to catch up with her. Vanessa might have gotten the house, but she couldn't afford to keep it. It wasn't long before she started selling things to stay afloat. I heard through the grapevine that she even pawned her engagement ring. She called it downsizing, but everyone knew what was happening. Even with all that, it wasn't enough. I couldn't help but reflect on her words during our marriage, the ones that cut me the deepest. "You're nothing without me," she used to say. But now I was standing strong, and she was the one who couldn't stand on her own. Vanessa was always the center of attention, the life of every party. But when the money dried up, so did her social circle. Her friends, the ones she used to laugh with over champagne and spa days, stopped coming around. At first, I thought maybe they'd stuck by her out of loyalty. But I realized it was never loyalty. They were just enjoying the perks of being in her orbit. No money, no perks, no friends. Her family? Well, they tried it first. They offered to help her get back on her feet, but Vanessa's pride wouldn't let her take their advice. Instead, she lashed out, blaming everyone else for her problems. Eventually, they stopped answering her calls. And then there was her lover. He was flashy, good-looking, and always happy to enjoy the dinners and gifts she lavished on him. But the moment the money ran out, so did he. She couldn't fund his lifestyle anymore. Quote, "The woman who once mocked my hard work now couldn't afford the life she took for granted." It had been over a year since Vanessa and I went our separate ways. So, when my assistant told me Vanessa was waiting in the lobby of my office building, I was surprised but not shaken. I took my time finishing the email I was typing before letting her in. She walked into my office, looking like a shadow of the woman she once was. She sat down across from me and started talking, her voice shaky and low. "I was wrong," she said, her eyes darting around the room like she couldn't meet mine. "I didn't appreciate you. Please, let's start over." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. She looked at me, searching for some sign of hope in my expression, but I didn't give her one. I had waited too long for an apology that felt genuine. And this wasn't about love or regret. It was about desperation. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and measured. "You were wrong, Vanessa. But here's the thing, I don't need you anymore. I'll be everything without you." Her face fell. For a second, I thought she might argue or try to guilt-trip me like she used to, but she didn't. Maybe she knew it wouldn't work this time. I pressed a button on my desk to call security, and within minutes, they were escorting her out of the building. I didn't watch her leave. I just turned back to my desk and got on with my day. That chapter of my life was closed. Looking back, I can honestly say I never felt the impact of Vanessa's absence. In fact, her leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. I found peace in my life, something I didn't even realize I was missing when I was with her. I stopped walking on eggshells and started living for myself. Not only that, but I've since been in a relationship with someone who truly values me. She doesn't belittle me or make me feel small. She respects me for who I am, and that's something I'll never take for granted again. Vanessa thought I needed her to succeed, but she was wrong. I didn't need her. I only needed to believe in myself. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's this. Don't stay in a relationship where you're not valued. You deserve someone who sees your worth, someone who lifts you instead of tearing you down. It's never easy to walk away, but sometimes it's the only way to find peace and happiness. So, what do you think? Did I make the right decision? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you've been in a similar situation. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're stronger than you think.